Okay, so with that, we can start today's class. Since there are two people who weren't here last week, I guess we can go and review what we did last week a bit, especially with HTML. Last week's Scratch was just a presentation. And actually, I would like to ask, did anybody who attended last week's class manage to mimic whatever I did on Scratch? Okay, so just for example, then I'm going to pull up just one apple and one cat. And can you tell me then what you put for the code in that for the cat? Just like write it down in the chat. Yeah, just put the code that you had and we'll go through it if it has any errors. And she left the meeting. Yeah, just like type it out in the chat. I don't want you to like present or anything. Just try and translate it as best as you can into like words. Okay. So since she isn't able to give us the answer, so then I'll just go over the cat specifically. So obviously we have our events and we only wanted to move two ways, right? So we have right and we had our left. And then we did either move 10 steps or move negative 10 steps. That was our basic commands for the cat, since the cat is going to be the one that we control. For the apple, that's where it starts to get a bit more complicated. So initially we had, when this is clicked, we want to set up a variable. I set up a score variable. So then we set score to 0. And then what we did is that forever we had what's it called? If. Oh yeah, and remember we changed the direction from 90 to 180 so that it's always pointing down. That way when we tell it to move 10 steps, it won't move to the right, it'll move down. That'll make it very easy for us to move and to sense stuff. Yeah, so I'm going over the apple right now. So then if touching edge, then what we said is we want to set X and Y. Go to X, our X is going to be our horizontal axis. We want to make it random wherever this appears. We want to make it random what point on this x-axis it appears. However, what we want to make sure is always the same is the height that it stops its drop from, right? So then we're going to see that, 143 is a good range. So we're going to set that to 143. And then in order to make sure that it's random, we have a pick random. So we have a pick random, and we see that like negative 200 to positive 200 might work. So negative 200, positive 200. Okay? Then after that if statement, for the else statement, we put another if else in that else statement. So then it would read like we set the score to 0, then we do this forever, like till we press this red stop sign. We check if it's touching the edge, then we teleport to a random x coordinate and the y coordinate. Otherwise, if we're touching the cat, then we want to increase the score by 1. Then we want to do the same thing. Okay, we want to just do this. Okay. Wait, hold up. I forgot one thing. We need to make sure that this is moving. So what we're going to do is we're going to make it move 10 steps before it even gets to that if statement. All right, so it's going to move 10 steps, then check everything, and then move 10 steps again. So, and then that else is just move 10. Wait. No, we don't need to put the moves 10 steps before. We can just put in that else statement, because if it's not touching anything, then we just want it to move down. Sir, I didn't understand touching edge. Okay, so it's just this block. So were you here for our Booleans lesson? I'm asking whoever's on the Tulja account. Okay, so you know that Booleans are true false, right? So any of these blue blocks with this corner kind of edge, they're going to be Booleans. So this Boolean is touching edge. So what it does is that it asks the computer, is this sprite, is this apple touching the edge, true or false? If it's true, then it goes and does this statement. Okay, so you can see how it's working here. Okay, so if it's touching the edge, then it goes to this. Otherwise, it goes to this next one. So now if we let it go, then oh wait, it's changing my variable. Again, small mistake. So we need to make sure that it's changing score by 1. And here we can see now that we've made a game, right? Obviously, it's a bit harder with just one apple because, okay, so you get the concept of the game. So does anybody have any questions? And did I answer your question about the touching edge component? Whoever's on that Doja account, did you understand then what the touching edge part is? Okay. And Anushka, from what I remember from last class, you didn't have a touching sprite, right? So you weren't able to do part of that if statement. Yeah, so uh, just make sure, okay, so if the other sprite is present and it's not letting you select any other kind of sprite, then as I said last class, that's an error in your hardware, in the scratch that you have. So that's not going to be a issue for us. As long as you understand the components behind the example, uh, that's all I want you guys to understand really. So that we have two concepts here. So if I were to make a new slide, so what we witnessed here, so components that we witnessed. So what we saw here is we have a loop, okay? You can see here we have a loop, a forever loop. Obviously, you don't do this in many programs, mostly just games, because you're always wanting to check for the conditions to see if they're met. Uh, and then we have if else statements, if else. And then another thing that we have that relates to the if else is a compound if else statement. So not only do we have just one if else, we have one if else here, we have an if else statement inside that if else. So compound if statements. And then the last component that we have is what is it? Booleans. So obviously with if statements, Booleans will always be present, but I just want to make sure that we understand that Booleans are being used here. So this is a Boolean, okay? And we have two different kinds of Booleans. We're either checking the edge or we're checking if it's touching the cat. So you have Booleans. And the last one, I guess, would be like random. So if you're ever coding in like Python or Java or anything, it'll be usually like math.random. But here it's just a random block and you specify the range that you want it to have. So does everybody understand all of the components that we have here? If you have a question on any of these, let me know and I can pull up like a Microsoft Paint document to explain it better. Yeah, Anushka. How do we make the background move? Like this backdrop, the backdrops? We, the backdrop does not have any motion blocks. So in Scratch, your background will always be static. What do you mean it does move? I mean, over here it tells me that there's no motion blocks, so I mean, maybe if I select like another stage, it'll... No, it still says no motion blocks. Okay, sorry. She keeps it a secret. Oh, I mean, you can change the effects of the backdrop, but I do not believe you can change the actual like motion of it. You could change it to a different backdrop, which could be like a if you like upload your own backdrops, maybe you could set up, you know, like those paper animations. You draw each frame on the next piece of paper and you just flip through it and it makes a like a motion. Maybe you could do something like that, but I don't see any way that you could physically move the backdrop, because if we would be able to, then I should have been able to move the backdrop when I click on it. Like I'm clicking on it right now and it's not moving. Okay. So does that wrap up all the questions that we had for Scratch? Okay, well, I don't know if you can ask her then. Uh, it's not something that I really find necessary, to be honest. Uh, Aryan, yes, I'm trying to tell it a bit slowly. Sir, my apple is going to the right. Okay, just make sure when you set the direction of the apple, you want to set it to 180, not 90. The default value for your direction will always be 90. So you want to go over here to the right side and hit 90 and hit that direction and set it to 180. Does that fix your problem? Okay. So next we'll move on to HTML. And since two of you weren't here, I think we'll go over what we did last class. So I remember correctly, we did style in the header and how to place images. So last week, so again, this is W3 Schools. This is their HTML tutorial. And so we can see here the two kinds of styles that I taught. So you have inline CSS, which you put within the tag. So just memorize this exact format. So it's always style equals sign, then quotation, and then you put whatever element that you want to change. So here they chose color, and then you put this semicolon, and then you put the value that you want to change it to. And then you put, I don't know what that symbol is called, and then you put your your ending quotation mark. And you only need to do that on the opening tag. So does everybody, basically the two people that weren't there, sir, why do we put negative near 200? Because on that scratch, the x coordinates are both negative and positive. We want to make sure that it's able to appear on both sides of that x-axis, not just on the 0 to 200. Okay, so does everybody understand this inline CSS? The two people that weren't here last week? Okay. Dheeraj, I get that you understand it. Okay. And then the next one is what we called internal CSS. So basically you set up a style tag. So you do this within the header of your HTML. So you have a opening and closing tag now for your style. So if we compare it to the inline, the style wasn't even its own separate tag. You put it within a pre-existing tag to change specifically that tag. So if we want to try it yourself, and then right after that, we put another header one type element. Okay, if we did that and we ran it, you can see that this header is black. It's not blue like how we had in the previous header because inline CSS only affects that specific tag, that specific instance of that tag. So the difference between that and internal CSS is that since you put body within this style tag, that means that every single body tag or every single header one or paragraph tag is going to be For header 1, it's going to be blue. For paragraph, it's going to be red. And for your body now, you don't need to specifically set the background color to powder blue. It's done in your head. So now if we look at this, it looks like this. And if I then go and put another header 1 tag like we did in the inline CSS example, we're going to see that it is also blue because this style tag makes sure that every header 1 tag within your HTML has been changed to the color blue. So does everybody understand that? Aryan, okay, so I think we went over this last week. Were you here? Just look, we moved on from the Scratch, but for the Scratch thing, what you want to do is instead of using the my variable that they already have in that my variable section, you want to make a new variable called score. So any new variable that you make that they don't already give you will show up on a counter at the top left. Okay, so where was I? So we're going to look at a new kind of CSS this week. It's called external CSS. So it doesn't show the exact, what is it? Okay, yeah, it does show the exact format. So it's going to be similar, basically the same as our internal CSS, the format. You're going to say whichever tag, and then you're going to put curly braces, then the name of the element, then semicolon, and then the value that you want it to change to. And then you're going to put this symbol just so that if you want to add any more elements that you want to change, so that it allows that to occur. So we can see here that it's the same format. And the only difference now is that it's a separate document. It's not within your HTML document. It's going to be styles. And then you know how we make an HTML file? We go to save as, and then we put .html. Instead of .html, now we put .css. And so then what we do is that within the header now, in our HTML file, we're going to link. So this is a new kind of thing that we're learning. So we're going to link style like href style.css. So I don't think we need to put this exactly, but yeah, so you can. Okay, so we do need to put the style sheet thing. So okay, wait. So then from what I remember, this makes sure that the HTML page knows that this is a style sheet and then formats it as such. So for your HTML to understand that you're putting in a style sheet, you need to add this. So I'll just put this code in here. So if you guys want to note it down or whatever for any future use. So they already have the style CSS file. We can't edit it or anything. So what I'm going to do now is that we can go on a little break. Actually, you guys ask questions first, then we'll go on a break. Then once we come back from that, we're going to go over an example. So I'm going to go in and create a HTML file and a CSS file, and we're going to go over that. Sir, what does the code do? So what the style element does is that it changes those elements, right? So this code, this HTML, this external CSS over here, this is just your style stuff. This is, I mean, this is, it's the same thing as before. It's just a separate file now. Okay, so I think we'll go on like a 5-10 minute break. I'll unmute when we're ready to start, and I'll make sure that you guys are all present before I begin teaching the next part. Okay, so we're back. Okay, I'm not going to be answering any questions about Scratch. We already went past that. We're focusing on HTML now. So unless you guys have any HTML questions, I think we can move on, right? Okay, so was your pixel art thing? Was that your question? The pixel art? I'm gonna need some response. Sir, how to see a picture in HTML? Okay, so that is going to be another one that we went over last week. So let me just pull up. I think it should be HTML class. So if we look at this HTML file that I have made, so open with Notepad, we can see this is our image, how we place images. So it's going to be image source equals download.jpg, since this is a JPEG file. And this alt is not necessary, but it's just put there in case your image fails to load, so that the person that's looking at it knows what kind of image you wanted to be there. So image src equals, and then quotation marks, download, then whatever file type your image is, maybe it's a PNG. So then you would put .png instead of .jpg. And then alt if you want to make sure that your reader knows. And we have an example of a style tag of an inline style. Then I think we can add in the head a internal style, just so that you guys can see close up. So then H1 color blue. Then that'll be our H1. And so then we can put H1 black holes. And you guys will be able to see firsthand now how exactly these two different styles work. So we can see here. Okay, wait, you guys. Yeah, my screen isn't showing the full screen. My bad. Okay, I'm going to my entire screen, and I'll just share it right now then. Okay, so yeah, that's my mistake. So here, if we're going to look at images, we go here. I have my HTML folder, and I have this test HTML file, and I have an image. Make sure that your image is in the same folder as your HTML file. Okay, that'll make it much easier. So then you open with Notepad, okay, and then you see here we have, this is our image, okay. So what we're basically telling our computer here is, okay, so we have an image, the source, basically the name and location. Since it's in the same folder, we can just put the name. We don't have to put the full location, as in like this PC documents HTML class download.jpg. Okay, that's why I said you should keep it in the same folder. So then source, quotation marks, download.jpg. If your file is a PNG, then you would put PNG, so on and so forth, like I explained before. Then quotation marks. And then, as I said before, alt is optional. Okay? So does everybody see that now? The image? Anushka, do you understand now how to put an image in? Okay, so then next we're moving on to, as I said, showing the examples of inline CSS as we have here. So style equals color red. This will change. Above is a black hole. Okay. And then we can add another one just to show you how inline CSS only affects that specific instance of the tag. So that's our example of inline CSS. Okay. So you just put it within the opening tag of the element that you want to change. And then this is just an example of how it only affects that specific tag. Over here we have our image. I'm assuming everybody understood that. And so then our next example is our style tag in the header. So we have our opening closing tags for the head. And then we have our opening and closing tags for the style. So then what we want to do is within that opening and closing tag, then we want to state which tag we want to change. And we chose H1. So H1, curly brackets, color blue. And then, what is it? If we wanted to change paragraph, then we would just put enter and then put paragraph and the same thing. And if I just add another H1, then we put Neil play, and we close that one up. Now we'll be able to see that it affects both of these tags, since style and the header is made to affect both tags. So let's just save it, and then we come here and refresh it. So you can see now, if we do a side by side, you can see that both headers were changed. Okay, so we can see firsthand that this style in the header changes all of the tags in your HTML. Then we have our example of the picture. And then we have an example of inline CSS. So we can see now that inline CSS only affects one paragraph. It doesn't affect the next one because inline CSS is for that specific instance. So does everybody understand those two types of CSS and the two types of styles and the two types of CSS and the image? What is black hole? Okay, well, I'm sure Mr. Santosh sir will be able to understand that much better than I can. Be sure to go to one of his lectures then if you want to understand. Sir, I did not get CSS. So which one did you not get? The inline CSS or the internal CSS? Internal CSS. Okay, so if we look here, For internal versus what is it? Inline, you just need to remember that inline only affects this one tag, right? But internal, it's in a separate tag, right? So if it makes it easier, I can just like copy and paste this into the chat just to make sure that you guys are able to see exactly like what I'm saying. So we have clearly here an opening tag for our header. Okay, yeah, so I'm not able to change that, so I'm just gonna put it in the chat then. So hopefully you guys can see it better now on your guys' screen. There's no way for me to really zoom in on this. I can maybe try and change the zoom in. Actually, yeah. Okay, so control plus. So control plus. Sir, could you explain me what you told us now? Okay, so you can see now that I figured out how to increase the size, increase the zoom. This style tag in the header, it changes this color for the header one, for this tag down here, for all instances of it. An instance is how many pairs of opening and closing tags you see of that specific tag. So here we have one instance, and then here we have our second instance. Now, unlike inline CSS, where we have two instances of the paragraph tag over here as well, but in inline CSS, putting the style in the opening tag of the first paragraph does not change the color of the second paragraph. So it only changes the specific instance in which we put it in. However, putting the style in the header and creating what we call internal CSS allows us to change every instance of the tag without specifically going in and changing the color one by one. So if I had, say, 100 header one tags and I wanted them all to be blue, now I don't have to change it one by one. So does everybody understand that? Okay. So then next we can go and try to put a CSS, like a CSS file. So we do new text document and we put style. Okay. And then we go to open, then we go to save as, and then we put style.css. That should yeah, so then we can see here style, the document type has now changed to a cascading style sheet. And if we look here, so then we can go to open with Notepad. And it's blank right now, but we can fill it up real quick with, say, what is it? H1 now. And if we do color blue, so as you can see, if we do another side-by-side comparison, okay, so as I did before, I'm just going to increase the size. So if we just do another side-by-side comparison of these two, the format that we have for the internal CSS like h1, then curly brackets, color blue, so on and so forth. That's the same thing here. The only thing that changes now is that we don't need to have an opening and closing tag for the style. Okay, so now we can get rid of this. And as we saw in our W3 schools, if we look at the exact syntax, so it's going to be this. So I'm just going to copy and paste it, and I'm going to change one thing. So so if I go into here, so here we can see that our styles, our CSS file is named style. So style.css. So now instead of having our opening and closing tag for the style, how did you increase the size? So it's, if we look at view, zoom, and then this shortcut right here, control plus. So I have my control key selected, and now I'm pressing plus. And if I press minus, then that lowers the zoom. So now instead of all of that opening and closing tag of the style, and then within that we have all the elements, now we just have one line that links us to an entire document that we can change. So now instead of putting style color red, I can put P, what is it? Color blue. Okay. And that'll work just fine. But now here's another thing. If I remember correctly, now this one will still remain red because we specifically changed the style within the tag. Okay, that inline CSS takes priority. Okay, the internal and the then next comes the internal CSS, and then after that the lowest priority to follow is what is it? This style sheet. Actually, for the what's it called? For the internal versus the style sheet, I believe it's whichever one you put first. So if I put like a style tag right after this, then whatever I put within that internal CSS will be applied to those tags if it differs from whatever I have in this style.css file. Okay. But that's a bit complicated. I think I'll go over that like next class maybe. So now we see we have a link to our style sheet. And if we save this, we go in and refresh it. Obviously nothing changes, and that's a good thing because well, obviously the color of this text changed. So we can see firsthand that our style sheet does in fact work. And so what we do then is to make that style sheet, as I said before, we go in, we create a text document, we go to save as, and then instead of putting .html, we put .css, and then we save it. Okay. So that should be it. Does anybody have any questions? Sir, can this be done on tablet? No, it cannot. So you would have to go to the try it editor. And obviously you wouldn't be able to do the external CSS, but you would be able to do the inline and internal CSS. So let me just give you the link to it right here. And that is going to be an HTML editor. So for basic CSS, it should be more than enough. So if there are no more questions, then I think we can wrap this class up. Yeah, so you guys are free to leave whenever you want.